Can XRP and Ripple help save the banks and solve the banking crisis? Now, I'm definitely not going to make a video saying that XRP and Ripple alone are enough to solve all of the problems that we're facing right now in the banking system. And what we're watching right now, folks, here's the data, and this is what's being reported across Twitter, is the 29 billion that was injected last night and yesterday in the overnight repurchase agreements of the Treasury securities. But in fact, if I look at this tweet right here from Pablo Keyman, he actually adds to the 29 billion of Treasury securities with an additional 20.9 billion of mortgage-backed securities as well. Now, in simple terms, what this means is that the banks pledged 29 billion of treasuries and almost 21 billion of mortgage-backed securities into these repo markets. And what they're doing is they're pledging it as collateral so that they can borrow short-term cash. This means that they need some money. And obviously, we have this government shutdown going on, and so liquidity is tightening up, and we could have some serious issues here in the first part of November if we don't get government back in business, payments going out. We already had, we were pretty close to catastrophe when the troops didn't get paid, and we made some adjustments there, managed to get them paid early. But the cracks are starting to widen, folks, and this is why Warren Buffett, I wanted to share just a couple data points with you guys here today. Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway, reports a record high cash balance of $381 billion. And I was noting in the Discord weekly call this morning that I just find it interesting, and it's just funny, that Warren Buffett in Berkshire Hathaway has as much in cash as the commercial banks have in unrealized losses. I mean, I don't have the number in front of me of the bank's unrealized losses, but I know it's over 300 billion. It's basically the same amount of cash that Warren Buffett has on hand. One more data point out of the UK. This banking situation is not just in America. The UK banks this week borrowed a whopping 97.9 billion in British pounds of liquidity from the Bank of England short-term facility. This is 10 billion more than the previous all-time high. So, I mean, we're starting to see some real issues, folks. And, why would I say XRP can help solve some of these issues? It's the combination of XRP being used to free up all that dormant capital, and that's been done. And this is not proof of concept. This is not speculation. It's happening right now with Ripple and their on-demand liquidity, which removes the need to pre-fund liquidity. The second part of this, though, is the stable coins. And you're starting to hear the suits love stable coins. They love being able to sell these products wrapped in ETFs, and they're loving stable coins. And even Jamie Dimon at the FIT conference taking place in the Middle East this week commented, along with Larry Fink at his side, Steve Schwartzman from Blackstone, right? The big guys meeting there in the Middle East. Brad Garlinghouse was actually on stage as well, too, in a roundtable with Tom Lee. But commenting on how crypto's here to stay, and you could kind of see the defeat on Jamie Dimon having to admit and capitulate that yes, crypto is here to stay. But I wanted to explain this for you guys here because this Swell conference taking place next week in New York, I think is going to be a very important meeting between Ripple and their banking and institutional partners, discussing how Ripple and the XRP ledger and the tokenization of the assets that these banks are looking to deploy, whether it be just their own stablecoin deposit coins. Ripple's obviously laid out the blueprint with RLUSD, but then tokenizing other real-world assets as well. That would be bonds, money market funds, BlackRock and VanEck. Mutual money market funds are going to be tokenized on the XRP ledger, right? We already have these announcements, and it's going to be a very important meeting, a meeting of the minds, we could say, in New York next week at the Ripple Swell conference, in my opinion, because there's serious issues that they face, but Ripple's here to help. And this has been the big difference between Ripple and XRP and some others in the space that have really, tried to replace the old incumbents completely. I think that you have a consolidation in the banking sector that is already underway and will continue to take place, not just from what we saw in 2023. We're seeing it again. And the big signal was sent from the Fed this week. The Fed's, you want to talk about solutions to the problem. Well, the Fed's going to show up again. And of course, when the Fed shows up, it's just slapping a bigger bandage on the wounded patient. And what we saw here is the Fed delivered the rate cut this week, but the big news was that they're going to end quantitative tightening December 1st. And they're just looking for an excuse to start up quantitative easing. And so when I read off these data points, and we need a solution here, the Fed is going to have the perfect excuse to come back here and quantitative tightening and say, oh, look at what's taking place here. We got to start back up the quantitative easing. Even if they don't call it quantitative easing, remember the bank term funding program from 2023? That was how they slapped a bigger Band-Aid on the small regional banks. I mean, obviously, they're willing to let some sacrifices be made, small regional banks that aren't systemically important, as Janet Yellen said. And so Jamie Dimon and Larry Fink and others know that this is going to be a prime opportunity for consolidation, and their positioning is as strong as it could ever be. The big question now turns to the ETFs, and they need to keep assets under management. The crypto opportunity is the best. We've shown this with real ROI on our portfolio on assets like XRP, which are still up over 400% since last year, well outperforming the rest of the cryptocurrency space. And so I want to read off this point right here. Let's get you guys zoomed in here a little bit closer here. Appreciate you guys for hanging out with me in the truck for this update on the go. This is from Teddy Ferruso, who is the president at Bitwise. And he's commenting on the Solana community and the success of the Bitwise Solana spot ETF that came out this week. Eric Balchunas from Bloomberg says, what a week for BSOL, that's the ticker. Besides the big volume, it led all crypto ETPs by a country mile in weekly flows with 417 million. And I want you guys to remember that market cap multiplier that we've shown you with XRP. What happens when XRP just gets 100 million of inflows and its market cap grows by hundreds of billions, right? 417 million flowing in here into this one Bitwise Solana ETF just in this past week. IBIT had a rare off week. It'll be back. It also ranked 16th in overall flows for the week. Big time debut. So, I mean, well outperforming the Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs. The next two were at 56 million in inflows a piece, and after that 32 million for WGMI, 32 million for BITO. I think I might have misread that. Yeah, but basically the next three ETFs for inflows still are behind the 417 million for this Bitwise Solana ETF, showing you that the inflows are coming on these altcoins. And I think that Solana is well positioned. We talked about this, about how Solana is well positioned to have significant inflows coming in. And this first week, 417 million on one ETF is pretty significant. When you add in additional ETFs and you let this play out for the next couple months, I mean, I think that even Solana is going to appreciate significantly. XRP just got an updated ETF from Canary Capital this week. We broke that news. And then following up, Bitwise also announced, or didn't announce, filed their amended S1 as well, starting the 20-day countdown for the Bitwise XRP ETF. So this tells us that we at least have two ETFs going live within the next 20 days, and we're looking for the other issuers to amend their S1s as well. There's 5 other spot ETFs for XRP through the 33 Act, and so I'm going to check the SEC website again. Getting pretty familiar with that website and looking through all the filings and tracking them down. I have all of the spot ETFs, the registration numbers, so I can just quickly look up and see if there's been any new filings. So as soon as those filings get amended, I will let you guys know. But basically, we know that the countdown is on. You have Canary Capital, which will go live on the 13th or 14th, and then you have the Bitwise, which will go live on the 19th or the 20th. After their 20-day countdowns expire. The other thing to watch out for is if the government shutdown ends, then you would see the potential for the SEC to just sign off on the rest of those ETFs. And bringing this back to BlackRock and XRP solving a serious problem for these banks and institutions when it comes to the treasuries. Obviously, they have a lot of toxic debt on their balance sheet, just in their treasuries and their mortgage-backed securities, commercial real estate and residential real estate. You're talking about trillions of potential toxic debt on their balance sheet, not including the $300 billion in bad debt on their treasuries. That's as unrealized losses. So maybe they can turn it around, and they've started to. Right? I've mentioned this. This is earlier this year. Bank of America had reduced their balance sheet unrealized losses pretty significantly. It was up over $100 billion at one point just for Bank of America alone, and they've been able to reduce that as well. And when I listen to the CEO of Bank of America, he sounds pretty confident. And it's interesting. It seems like people that are positioned and partnered with Ripple, trialing the XRP ledger, working with Ripple since 2016, 2017, long time coming for that partnership and the go live and the veil being lifted. They speak with confidence. I find it interesting that so many Ripple partners are making acquisitions themselves. They speak very confident. And when it comes to, what problem does it solve? As I've mentioned, you're freeing up dormant liquidity that has to be parked in these pre-funded Nostro and Vostro accounts. We've seen that already play out with on-demand liquidity growing substantially into the tens of billions. And then now you're going to see the stablecoins and the real-world assets that these banks and institutions are looking to tokenize as well coming to the XRP ledger, right? And Ripple has laid out the blueprint. They're here to hold hands. And then once Ripple gets the banking charter, then the National Trust Charter Bank, or whatever it is, right? As soon as they get that, they can hold the collateral for these real-world assets that are going to get tokenized, whether it be stocks, mutual funds, bonds, stablecoin, deposit coins, etc., all of it. Once Ripple themselves becomes a bank, they'll have the ability, and they already really do with standard custody in New York. But I think that this will kind of, put them on that scale, and then we'll see if they end up, maybe they can get a Fed master account as well too, which would just fully place them within the existing banking system. But I think it's pretty clear to me the role that Ripple and XRP is here to play. This is not a project that has just been hyped up. This is real utility in action. We can see these flows of liquidity. They've been steadily growing during a lawsuit prior to regulations going live. Once the regulations go live, you're going to start to see more and more of these banks and institutions lifting the veil on their Ripple partnership. Once the ETFs go live, you're going to start to see the inflows, and we already are tracking it right now, right? 417 million more inflows into Solana ETF than Bitcoin, Ethereum, and the BlackRock ETFs. So you're seeing the appetite is there. The problems are definitely there. And as I told my Discord group this morning, it's just a matter of staying liquid, keeping our head on a swivel through the first part of November, because we could see some things break, could get a little bit ugly, but I think that we got a pivot point coming up here November 5th through the rest of this month. I think you're going to have a pivot back up to the upside in anticipation of the XRP ETFs going live. And you're just going to see another wave of ETFs start to go live, regardless of the government being shut down or not. My bet is that the government shutdown does end in the first half of November. We'll see how that plays out. But this, along with the China deal, there's just a lot of tailwinds right now, despite the fact that there's some cracks widening in the private credit market. Some banks are having a little bit of stress, right? But I think that they have the solutions in partners like Ripple and in tokenizing their stablecoins and real-world assets on the XRP ledger. The reason why you do so is because it's the most liquid ledger, right? It's efficient, liquidity, deep open public pools, but then also Ripple has built out the private ledger capability if they want. And then you just hit that big red button to bring down the walls for your walled garden and interact with the public ledger. Ripple's built that capability with their partners as well too. So we're going to see it's going to be a big, massive week in Swell, New York City. All of the banks and institutions that are partnered up with Ripple are going to be there, and really looking forward to reporting and letting you guys know what we see. But once again, if you guys appreciate our content, we're going to bring it here on a daily basis because the fundamentals just keep continuing to get better. Like I said, keep some liquidity, stay safe out here. Not promising that we're going to, 20 to 30 bucks this month, but I'm watching for XRP to make a good run leading up to the ETFs going live. And then after the ETFs go live, I have a base case of $20 to $30 in the next 12 months. So that's where it stands from my vantage point here. I hope you guys had a fantastic Halloween. We survived October, and I think things are looking really good into November. So if you appreciate what we're doing, please help us out by liking this video, sharing our content out far and wide, and all of our community resources are available at zachrector.com. Thank you so much, and God bless you all.